States here from Pop Turn is speaking to Jake Foy about his short musical film More Together, which is going to be on Broadway HD and Prime Video starting July 5th. Welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Pete. Glad to be here.
I'm really excited to chat with you about this. You know, whether it's a short film or a feature, it all starts from that kind of first idea, right? And a film like this kind of has a lot of elements thrown at it. So I'm just curious, like, which one came first? Like, was it kind of the fact that you wanted to make a musical? Was it the coming of age? Was it the love story? Like, which was the first kind of preliminary idea of this film that has so many elements?
Yeah, it's a bit of everything, actually. I first was introduced to the material in college, so almost a decade ago, where I was hired to direct my peers at Sheridan College for music theater. And part of that summer program was to reach out to up-and-coming composers. And Drew, who is still a rising talent, was up-and-coming at the time. So the Tom and Lucy music existed in isolation. There was no script to connect the material because it was developed in like a creative lab. Those songs for a long time. And then in 2019, my team and I released a 5-minute short called Before They Were Them. And we did an international release for that and a festival run. And as we were looking to expand our slate, we developed a feature musical that we're still working on. But in the meantime, before we felt that was viable to go to camera with, we were like, what can we do that's shorter than the feature, but longer than the 5-minute short? And these songs popped back into my head. So we reached out to Drew Gasparini, and that's where More Together was born.
And I'm really curious because there's so many kind of stages in terms of putting the music together, making sure everything's good and everything. So I feel like those conversations with Drew about the music specifically before you go to camera and after you and while you're going to camera, are they very different? Are they different Zoom calls, or are they kind of, does this kind of seem like it's the same flow? Like, what are those conversations like with him before going to camera on this?
Yeah, they are Zoom calls. Drew is New York City based generally, sometimes in LA, but we're based up here in Vancouver while we were developing the project. But there's actually a song that existed previously that's now instrumental in the end credits. But essentially, we went to Drew with the notion of taking 4 out of 5 existing songs in this universe and linking them together. And what people don't really understand about the movie musical execution is all of the decisions surrounding music have to be made before going into production. So we worked on what ended up being the original screenplay that I penned and how that would link the music and affect the runtime of the music, lyric changes from what had existed, all of it to fit into this format of a 40-minute musical short. And that took a few months, but full credit to Drew, who was totally flexible and open and just excited to see a bit of a revival for the material because it had been a long time since it had been center stage on his slate. And from that, we landed on everything that you see in the project now. And we recorded about a week before we went to camera, actually, because we were so late in finding our Tom and our Lucy. And everything sort of just fell into place from there. And we'll also be releasing an original motion picture soundtrack everywhere you can stream music. So that's
oh my goodness, this is like the perfect segue to my next question. This is amazing. Okay, because well, actually, I lied. It wasn't my next question, but I was going to ask this, but I have to ask it now. But I feel like one of the coolest things about musical films is the fact that you do have this two-headed monster, right? Where you have people watching the film and then they can go listen to the soundtrack. Do you and Drew talk about that at all? Because I feel like that's one of the coolest things.
Yeah. It was a privilege of mine to work on Come From Away actually in college before its Broadway run. So one of the things that came from that experience was watching the development through execution of a original cast recording and what that looked like as a demo, and then how that evolved through the original Broadway company, et cetera. But for this, we always knew that it'd be part of our vision to release that motion picture soundtrack. And then one of the things that we haven't announced yet, but it'll be a first here, is that that'll include instrumental karaoke tracks for the fans to sing along to, for music festivals or community theater showcases or what have you. So there'll be the full concept album of the film, and then also those tracks and some of the original orchestrations by our fantastic orchestrations and scorer, or I guess he's just sort of a maestro. Mike Ferraro did all of the engineering of the music for the film, and so I have to tip my hat to him because we couldn't do it without him.
The karaoke is a great call because there's some bops in this. So
yes, there's some hummable tunes. I agree.
Like, Bob, you're watching this and you're seeing this like love story, and you're just like, I'm bobbing my head like he's on the bus. And
you can see why the song stuck with me for more than a decade. They're beautiful songs, and to Drew's credit, he wrote them very early in his career. He's gotten even better with time, and is working on some really cool things. He's done, the Super Bowl ad with Melissa McCarthy. He's got the Karate Kid headed to Broadway, which is really fantastic. So everybody's doing their bit to make memorable songs come to life.
We're big Cobra Kai fans over here. So when you were told me about this and I saw the name,
so is Oscar, so is Oscar, who played Tom. He's a big Cobra Kai fan.
Absolutely. It's interesting too. So this because you're also an actor, and this about indie film and everything. You naturally have to do a lot of things and wear many hats. So you wrote this, you directed this, you were like the production designer for this as well. So it's like, did that feel like it just made sense? Was it kind of overwhelming? Did it kind of I'm just curious, what was that like, that mindset, like knowing you were going to have to wear many hats on this?
Yeah, it comes from naivety, actually, or it did at the time. Everything now that we're working on for our slate has a larger team involved, but at the time we had limited resources for hands. And it had been a while since I had been working really regularly in front of the camera. It was actually on the precipice of doing my first series lead with Ride. We shot this a week before I actually showed up late to production on that. But as far as wearing many hats, it was just what was required to make this budget stretch to get this done. That said, it didn't feel daunting at the time because the world is so tightly encapsulated. It's really just this two-person love story with, orbiting family and friends, but it was designed, quite frankly, to have limited locations, but high production value. So it felt like if I didn't do it, we might stretch ourselves too thin and fall short of the goal. So it was daunting, but not as much as it is in hindsight. It was actually way crazier to take on in practice than it was in theory. And thank God that I was that naive, because we might have not been so brave if we had known how big an undertaking it was.
100%. Director question for you right now. Oscar and Angel are just incredible in this film. The chemistry on screen is amazing. As soon as you just see them for the first time, that first musical number, you're like, this is going to work out for the rest of the film. You know what I mean? So my question for you is, it's interesting because I'm watching this film and it's the love story, but I'm thinking a lot, Jake, about like the self-reflection component of it, right? And these characters figuring things out, they're lost. And like, I'm wondering, because you're also an actor as well. You've gone to play characters like this, or been in shows and movies that have this, where like playing these lost characters might be challenging and fun because a lot of these characters don't know that they're lost, right? So I'm just wondering, what were those specific conversations, if there were any, with your actors in regards to that component of it? Because I found that was really interesting from a viewer perspective.
That's a really astute question. Chemistry is obviously something that everyone is looking for with everything that they ever make. And what's unique about this is that I agree with you. We got very, very lucky in the on-screen dynamic between the two. But what people don't know is that Angel was actually living in Toronto at the time and got the breakdown from the West Coast by accident, actually. And so what's weird is we really only had, this is not to discredit anyone else who auditioned for these roles, but there were really only the two of them that we felt strongly could bring to life the right amount of innocence on the cusp of their adulthood, and that they and yet they had never met. So by the time we got into the recording studio, that was the first time that they ever laid eyes on each other. And I think that their optimism for the musical form and the movie musical and all of the, good stuff in between really helped us find a balance between them. They both have an appreciation for the genre that's unparalleled. And so we couldn't have been luckier with finding them, but we really had no clue until they got into the recording studio on whether or not it would work at all. We'd only seen them in, Zoom rectangles until that point. So I really appreciate you saying that. And I feel like that's one of the, knock on wood, lucky things about this project.
And I feel like it's really, it's always crazy to me when you see that kind of switch from they're like singing and then they're just having dialogue and then they're back to singing. Like,
Mhm.
I can't even imagine the like preparation. You know what I mean? I just feel like in general, just for a movie, like you just
Yeah.
preparing your lines is enough. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. They do it really seamlessly. And one of the things we talk about in preparation is something that comes from my academic background in
Yeah.
music theater. And the sort of cardinal rule is that if you feel too strongly to speak, it might lead you to song. And if you feel too strongly to sing, it may take you to dancing. So in that hierarchy, we really never break into dance in this piece. So it's a really delicate flow between dialogue and singing. And obviously with that pre-recorded audio, both of the actors are lip syncing to their pre-recorded voices when we're on set, but those transitions have to happen. So we go from spoken word through to them singing live, and then we slowly blend into what's been pre-recorded. So I really appreciate the compliment because it's a technical accomplishment as well as an emotional
Well,
one.
it's so funny you mentioned kind of also, yeah, like the dancing, like, because I'm sure you have friends or know people that worked on Grease Rise of the Pink Ladies. And I looked at that one and I was just kind of like, that's like a three-headed monster, right? Because you also have the dancing. I'm just like, I can't even, like, wow. Like, I just,
yeah, and that's what our team is really excited to do after More Together. We've got a feature musical on our slate that does include quite a bit of dancing that we're really excited about. But obviously, to continue playing in the sandbox of the genre is something that's really important to us at Day by Day, and we're looking forward to more.
Okay, this is just a very simple question, and I feel like this just can be a lot of answers, right? But just from a filmmaking perspective, right, Jake? Like, I'm just asking you, why musicals? Why musical theater? Like, I'm just curious. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
no, very fair. I think that the genre has always spoken to me, and I believe the connective tissue with which we're able to process a lot, as a community, as a society, and as a species, we're the only animal that can perceive both rhythm and pitch at the same time. So music as an expression of feeling is uniquely human, and that's sort of undeniable. And I think since stories have been told, like Greek theater history or even in indigenous performance history, all involves music. So for as long as we've been telling stories, we've been using music to tell them. And I think it's funny that we've kind of created this divide between non-musical narrative storytelling and narrative musical work. And so what we're trying to do is bring legitimacy back to the movie musical so that it doesn't feel, like characters are stopping to begin singing and then stopping feeling again, that there's a natural flow between the action of the scene and then through the action of the song. So hopefully, in a small way, More Together leaves a mark or impression for that kind of treatment. The numbers feel like they come out of the gate with tons of energy and sustain that energy throughout. And instead of feeling like music video moments, hopefully they feel like scene work or progressions of the character's wants and needs.
absolutely. Two more kind of quick questions. One just general question I want to ask you about your acting specifically. I find it interesting because there's different kind of ways to think about what I'm gonna ask, but like how separate are like past projects that you act in versus like the current ones that you work on and everything? Like, do you bring things from like Ride to something you're working on now? Are they completely separate mindset wise? Like, I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, both things actually. It's a really great question. As far as mindset for approach, it's really, really different to wear the hat of talent coming to someone else's vision than it is to helm the vision. But for me, each informs the other. So every time I'm on a set, no matter the scale, if I'm there as talent, I'm observing how the communication is functioning between the actor and the creative or crew, how the dialogue between the writers and the network is happening, how that affects the performance and who you're making happy. I think one of the strengths that I feel confident speaking to is my ability to liaise with actors and communicate a clarity of vision without stifling their creative space either. And that's something that I have come to really, really value in leadership above me when I'm talent. Something that I can lead the charge in when I'm directing, because there's nothing worse than coming to what might be a very clear, ambitious vision for a project, but then feeling like you're a puppet or cog in the wheel of something larger. And I think what's fantastic about what Oscar, Angel, and the rest of the ensemble brought to this project is they brought an enthusiasm for the piece, and then were willing to sort of play within the rigid parameters of what we were doing on a really tight shoot schedule, but have fun with it as well.
But I feel like you being an actor, I feel like that was great for them to have you as a director, because you kind of understand that landscape too in a lot of ways.
You'd have to ask them, but I'm hopeful that that's the case. I don't want to speak for their feeling on behalf of my.
No, but your approach was like you understand it a little bit from an acting perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
That's what I meant. I'm not saying.
Yeah, no. I hope it never felt like. I hope it never felt like actors were coming to the table without their unique stamp on the characters being totally valid and welcome. And that's why they were hired after all. So we got lucky. Even as tight a schedule as we were on, we got to play a little bit, particularly in the scene work with colors and tones. Jill Morrison is fantastic at that. So is Jeff Gustafson. And LaTanya Williams, who plays Lucy's mom, is a very close friend. So there's a very natural relationship between me and the talent, because a lot of them were our first choices.
Absolutely. Last question, big question, huge question here. You established from the beginning of this interview that there were kind of so many things that happened before going to camera on More Together. So I'm just wondering, from a storytelling perspective, you can look at this as two journeys, right? Before filming More Together and after filming More Together. Or for you specifically, do you see it as one big journey with multiple steps in between? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I think my knee-jerk answer is that we're still on the journey of More Together.
Yes, it's like a whole big thing, yes.
Yeah, it happened in such a fluid way, where we thought we were shooting and going to go immediately into editing that fall, and then I ended up doing a lead on that series, and then we worked through post-production. Then the festival circuit became something we weren't always sure we would aim to do, and then we took that on, and then we're well received. Obviously, I've got laurels over my shoulder that I'm not afraid to boast for, but yeah, it's still ongoing. And I think what's interesting now and why we're connecting is that we're sort of on the precipice of whether or not we'll find an audience, or the fans of the Tom and Lucy music that listed songs over 1 million times on streamers, if they'll be as interested to see the story brought to life on film as well. So we're very hopeful, but our fingers are still crossed, just like they were when we went into shooting. And we'll hope that the audience that loves this story gets to discover it in an entirely new way. And you'll be journey for having hosted me here at Popternative.
Absolutely. Jake, so great chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, man.
Likewise. Thanks for having me, Pete. It's been fantastic.
There's going to be a lot of different ways for them to check it out. So let's do some plugs here. So it's going to be available on Broadway HD and Prime Video, but then Prime Video internationally at some point as well, right?
Yes, in English language countries. Later in July, we're going to be fully able to stream on Prime Video. But for tomorrow, we've got our exclusive release on Broadway HD, which we're very excited about. And then Prime Video will follow shortly after. And Broadway HD also has a channel on Prime Video. So if you don't have the full subscription, you can access it there. And we look forward to hearing what you think. We're excited to share it with you.
And you have your Instagram account specifically for you, like Jake Foy, that people can connect as well, right?
Yes, at Jake Foy 55. You can keep up to date on everything that I'm doing creatively, whether it's in front of or behind the camera. And thanks for watching, for those of you that tune in.
Awesome. Well, this has been PopTurn, youtube.com/PopTurn for previous episodes. Until next time, this is Jake Foy and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.